Hi guys, welcome to part 3, and I'm excited because this part has a lot to do with me in a way of sorts. The first thing that I just want to iterate is the fact that Ra starts talking about how we have gone from 3D to 4D, and they do talk about how what has to happen on this planet in order for us to transfer to a 4D planet is that we need to have at least half or 51% positive, like a loving planet. If we were like 95% almost totality evil, we wouldn't have made it. But the thing is, this recording was done in the early 80s. Now, we did in fact transfer to a 4D planet in the year 2012, which is when a lot of people started to awaken. So that did happen, and obviously it won't iterate in these tapes because they were recorded earlier. And they do start talking about the Wanderers, which is another, there's so many names, but if you watched my video on being a second waver or a light worker, an empath, all these names and star seeds, indigo children, all these things, wanderers. A wanderer is like Ra in its being that will come back to Earth and help the planet move forward in a higher frequency, because we want to move forward to 5D. Now, just really quickly, we're going to get into the numbers and the actual processes later, but just so you can follow along with when they're explaining things like this, is that now that we have gone to 4D, we want to move to 5D. So what happens is a lot of people that are in 6D, just like Ra, who have graduated to it, like 90 million years of existence and being and consciousness and energy. And even though they have been through the 3D, 4D, and 5D, they are going to come back from that graduation and risk coming back to this planet under the veil of forgetfulness, because we don't remember our past lives. We know nothing except for being in this 3D, even though we are all billions of years old, really, as far as the universe is concerned, but we can't remember any of that. So when a six-dimensional being comes into our 3 and 4D reality, they will forget as well. And it's a risk, because if they develop any karma and get stuck here, they don't get to go back to their 6-dimensional being. They would actually have to work for it again. So it is a risk, but now that we've graduated to 4D, a lot of them are taking that risk. And that's why a lot of the children being born now are the wanderers. It's easy to kind of almost want to grab on saying, oh, I'm a wanderer. Because who wouldn't want to be a 6-dimensional being? But the reality is there's very few wanderers out there. There's a lot of second waivers, people from 5D that have come back to do some more work, things like that. People like myself who are the second waivers, and no one knows for sure what dimensional you're coming from, whether you're a starseed or indigo or just an empath. No one will really know, and anyone who tries to say for certain, does not know for certain, really. They do talk a little bit about wanderers that we've had before in the past, and they were the big seers. We're talking about Buddhas, Christ, even I think Nikola Tesla was a 6-dimensional being. So we've had them here before in the past that were the great seers and people of knowledge, and that were trying to accelerate the whole planet into awakening. So they'll start talking more about that, but you have to listen to these tapes over and over again, because the messages do get lost. And because Ra, when he starts speaking in the tapes later on, he uses such big words, and he uses words that can best describe our 3D reality, as opposed to his energy being in his 6D dimension. So the translation can get lost a little bit, but this was an important piece that I just want to iterate before we get back into it. And yeah, it's starting to get really exciting. So I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's get into part 3.
Something that the Confederation has called the harvest will take place. This concept of the Judgment Day differs from the eschatological one in that the one who judges us is not a God apart from us but the God within us. As a result of this harvest, some will go on to a new age of love and light and will learn new lessons in a very positive and beautiful density, as the Confederation calls it. Others will have to repeat this particular grade of lessons and relearn the lessons of love. Here the Confederation entity, Hatton, speaks once again of the harvest and of the Confederation's purpose in speaking through contactee groups. There is going to be a harvest, as you might call it, a harvest of souls that will shortly occur upon your planet. We are attempting to extract the greatest possible harvest from this planet. This is our mission, for we are the harvesters. In order to be most efficient, we are attempting to create first a state of seeking among the people of this planet who desire to seek. This would be those who are close to the acceptable level of vibration. Those above this level are of course not of as great an interest to us since they have, you might say, already made the grade. Those far below this level, unfortunately, cannot be helped by us at this time. We are attempting at this time to increase by a relatively small percentage the number who will be harvested into the path of love and understanding. Even a small percentage of those who dwell upon your planet is a vast number, and this is our mission, to act through groups such as this one in order to disseminate information in such a fashion that it may be accepted or rejected. That it may be in a state lacking what the people of your planet choose to call proof. We offer them no concrete proof, as they have a way of expressing it. We offer them truth. This is an important function of our mission, to offer truth without proof. In this way, the motivation will, in each and every case, come from within the individual. In this way, the individual vibratory rate will be increased. An offering of proof or an impressing of this truth upon an individual in such a way that he would be forced to accept it would have no usable effect upon his vibratory rate. This, then, my friends, is the mystery of our way of approaching your peoples. Another concept that has come out of the many communications from alleged UFO entities is that of wanderers. They are usually service-oriented people, and, as would be predictable, they often have a great deal of difficulty fitting into the planetary vibrations of Earth. Often they have the feeling that they do not fit in or do not belong, but at the same time, very often, these people are possessed of many gifts, in the arts, in teaching, or in the simple sharing of a cheerful and happy vibration. Which certainly does not suggest the normal attitude of a simple malcontent. This concept is particularly interesting to many people who will be drawn to the raw material because, according to that material, much of it will be most easily recognized as being useful by wanderers. There are not just a few wanderers on Earth today. Ra suggests a figure of approximately 6 to 5 million. They have left other densities in harmonious environments to take on a kind of job that is most difficult and dangerous. For if a wanderer cannot at least begin to pierce the forgetting process that occurs at birth into this density during his or her lifetime on planet Earth, and remember the love and the light that the person was intended to share, the wanderer can conceivably become caught in the third density illusion, collecting what may loosely be termed as karma, and be delayed in arriving again at the home planet until all that is unbalanced in third density in this lifetime has been balanced. When Don Elkins and I wrote Secrets of the UFO in 1976, we devoted a chapter to the concept of wanderers and used material gathered in hypnotic regressions of 3 women who were friends in this lifetime and who, when separately regressed, gave independent and dovetailing stories of their lives on another planet. After that book went to press, we were able to work with a man whom the women had named as being a part of that experience on another planet. This man, who was then a student working towards his master's degree in chemical engineering, was aware of no detail of our research except that we were involved in doing some hypnosis. On May 10, 1975, Don, along with Lawrence Allison, an accomplished hypnotist with whom we had worked often when he lived in Louisville, sat down with our 4th volunteer and proceeded to explore that other world for a 4th time. The information was especially interesting, since all 3 previous regressions had been poetic and beautiful, but scarcely technical. Our 4th subject had a far different background and was able to see things in a far more accurate and explicit manner. This 4th regression fitted perfectly into the story told by the first 3 subjects. One of the first things that Don and Larry, the questioning went back and forth, asked about was the clothing. Q, how are you dressed? A, in white. A, loose white clothes. Q, okay, what's above the waist now? Above the pants? A, well, it's just like a robe. It's not really a robe but a loose clothing with a sash, like for a belt. Q. And what about on the shoulders? A. Well, it's just short-sleeved, it's warm. This type of robe suggests a monastic or religious order, and questions were asked to attempt to discover some orthodox religious connection on this planet. No connection was found, so the questioners moved on to the name of this other world since the surroundings were not those of Earth, but the young man, normally incisive in his answers, seemed totally unaware of the concept of naming. Q. The name of your planet? A. It's just we live there, and I don't see any mountains, but I see the name? 2. A. I have a child. Q. One child? A. Yeah, little boy. Q. His name is? A. I just don't have a feeling for names. I have, like, you know when you want somebody, and they know when you want them, sort of. I mean, I just don't have a feeling for names. Not only did their planet seem to lack a proper name, but speech itself seemed to be a far different process, one which we would probably call telepathy. Q. All right, if someone calls to you, what do they call you? A. I just haven't heard anybody speak. I don't know if you have to speak. 2. The symbol separates two quotations from the same regressive hypnosis session. A. It seems like kind of a simple life, but there's obviously, well, there was light at my books, so it's obviously mechanized, or perhaps much more than that even. I don't recall people speaking to each other, though. I mean, they seem to, you know, everybody knows each question, you know what's going on, but I don't really see. It was singing, there was singing. But there wasn't actually people conversing with each other, you just sort of knew, I guess. A. I'd be sitting on a stone or a bench and they'd be sitting down, and I'm explaining, but I don't really see myself talking to them. The subject, with his engineer's eye, was able to put together the architecture of the place in the way the women had not. All four agreed that the center of the community and its purpose was something that may conveniently be called a temple. A. Think it's a stone, I guess limestone, but it's wider, I guess. That's what it's made of. Q. What about the perimeter? A. Well, there's, from supports from the side are arches up to the ceiling, but it's not a regular dome. It's, well, I haven't seen that kind of dome before. Q. Take a good guess. How far across is that dome? A. Oh, goodness, it looks like it's 200 feet the long way, and maybe more than that, maybe 250, and, oh, maybe 150 feet wide. It's a huge room, very. Q. Okay, now, how is it lighted? A. Just laughs a little incredulously. Really, it's just a glow from the ceiling. I mean, you know, like the, well, there's, like the area that's light, and then there's darker, like it's been painted, but the paint, that's light. It seems like it's, well, it just doesn't need any light. The room's bright, maybe it's coming from the windows, but there doesn't seem to be any shadow in the room. Q. What you're saying is that it seems as if the atmosphere in the room is glowing there? A. Well, yeah, just like it's bright. I don't see any shadows, like if there was a light source. Q. Up. Now I want you to listen inside that big room. What kind of sounds do you hear? A. Nothing in that room, but they're singing someplace. Q. Very quietly, singing off in the distance? A. Q. All right, it is, some kind of. A. It's more like a kind of choir, a little choir, like. That music, reported by all four subjects, is not like any music we have ever heard. 2 of the subjects actually saw the music sparkling in the air and none could accurately describe it. A. I can't place the words, it's just, you know, like a sort of praise, a sort of, you know, something like you'd hear in a choir. Q. Praise to whom? A. Well, Q. To God? A. I'm sure that's who it is. You know, it's sort of a happy thing to do, when people get together and sing. The subject spoke of growing up studying in large books. A. I see myself sitting over a book and just reading. Q. History? A. Well, I don't know. Q. Practical work? Science? What do you study? Art? The arts? A. Just great books, big books. Q. Do you have supervised study in classes or? A. Well, in the morning there's a teacher, and in the afternoon or in late evening, I study. Q. Is there an examination? A. No exams. You just want to learn. You want to learn. It's like you can't learn enough. Who were these people? Did they represent an entire planetary population or were they a portion only of that population? If they were a portion, how were they chosen to do this work? After looking at this material, Don and I generated a term by which to call this particular group of people, the clan. Here is one of the questioners on this subject. Q. Nobody has individual homes? A. Well, No, this big place is their home. This is home. Well, this is one purpose. Like, it's like a school, or a teaching place to teach those that want to learn it in depth, and those that come when they can. But this isn't like a ruling type people, by any means. Like, this isn't like the people have to come here. It's not a class system or anything. Meditation played a very large part in the lives of the inhabitants of this other world, or at least those in this clan. There were meditations alone and there were daily group meditations with the entire clan. Well, let's see, I don't see myself there, in different states of consciousness. There are prayerful times, in the morning and at night. You have them in your room, and then you have others before meals, before the morning meal, and then, briefly before the evening meal, but, it was like when the food was brought, but then afterwards it's in a room, like a private sort of devotional, except that you're not, like in meditation, and there are times when the whole group gets together other than meals, just like the whole place is like a family, I would guess, because, like I said, you don't feel that attached, necessarily, to one person. You feel attached to everybody. They're all, like, in your family. Another function of the clan was to open their great temple from time to time to all of those of the planet who wished to come for spiritual inspiration. The questioners, in attempting to determine just how these large crowds came to fill the temple, happened upon the description of what seemed to be a very large heliport. We discovered later that the vehicle was not a helicopter. However, that is the term that the questioner used here. Okay, now, the people that leave at that heliport, you have no idea where they go? When I say these ships come, it's not like hordes of people just rushing off and rushing back on or anything. How should I it lands there, and the doors open, and the people come out, and people come in. They're allowed to go on the grounds, In other words, this is their place too, but they come as a visitor, sort of, to it. How long do they stay there? A day. The description of the heliport. There's a flat place, like, that stone, out in front, but I don't see roads coming to it. For it I see a huge helicopter pad, for instance, but the questioners had to find out what was landing on that large stone area, and so the subject was asked to describe the type of transport that used it. All right, I want you to describe that ship, and what makes it go. I don't it's like it seems it's probably a spaceship, but I don't see it coming from space. It's sort of, suddenly almost being there. I don't see it like zipping off or coming in, across the horizon or anything. Just describe what it looks like. It's longer than it is wide, and it's not real thick compared to the length dimensions and the width dimension. It's not spinning when it comes down, because it's a little sort of, like oblong, or it just sort of appears and sets down, I don't see it actually coming into view from small and getting larger. It is interesting to note the apparent description of materialization and dematerialization implicit in the subject's answer to the question. And so the young man grew in wisdom and in years and told a story of teaching, growing somewhat gray-haired, beginning to teach fewer and more advanced students, and in time preparing to end the incarnation, as the questioners brought the subject back through the death experience in the previous incarnation and forward in time to the experience in which he was at that moment living. They paused with the subject in between incarnations to ask about the purpose this particular wanderer came to Earth to fulfill. The answer that he gave is both provocative and all too scanty. Many of us seek to help this planet of ours in one way or another, and the question is always, how shall we accomplish it? Why are you on Earth? What is the purpose of this life? What do you intend to do here? What were you assigned to do here? It seems like, to help. Helping with what? Something in particular? Something. Have you already helped in this field, or is the problem yet to come that you are to help with? It hasn't happened yet. What do you anticipate? Just great needs. What would happen, to require so much help from you that you know about, was, spiritual growth, spiritual development, physical needs? Not the I get the feeling of some people that are lost, Can you help them? This is your mission? I feel like that's what I need to do, help those people. Which people? The ones that are lost. Is this a particular group? No, just in general. Just people. The work I did in early 1976 was to be my last. I had had a condition called juvenile rheumatoid arthritis with several complications, one being SLED, commonly known as lupus, since I was 13 when my kidneys had failed. In 1956, the advanced techniques that are available now to those whose kidneys fail were not available. In fact, it was considered a miracle that I survived, but survive I did with the loss of approximately half of each kidney. I consider myself very fortunate to have been able to have had a productive and active physical life for so long with the odds going so far against me. Even now, with the help of exercise, diet, friends, and faith, I feel most blessed, but my activities are limited. The research that Don and I had done up to that point brought us across the knowledge of a highly unusual type of healing. And it was in part my disability which caused us to put ourselves so wholeheartedly into an examination of that type of healing. Psychic surgery bears only a tangential relationship to orthodox surgery and no relationship to orthodox medicine. It is, like all brands of faith healing, impossible to prove, and the natural and standard response, not only from scientists but from any person who has not done any research into the subject, is an automatic turn-off and utter disbelief. This is to be expected. Were it not for many years of research, this would perhaps be our reaction also. However, we, like most who investigate psychic surgery, knew that we had nothing to lose by investigating this possibility. No psychic surgery patient has ever been lost because nothing actually happens to the patient's physical body. It is truly a psychic form of healing. Consequently, we spent some time both in the Philippines and in Mexico taking part in an examination of the possibilities of psychic surgery. Many have attempted to research psychic surgery by analysis of its products and have found either inconclusive results or null results, indicting that psychic surgery is a fraud. In the book, Origo, by John Fuller, Dr. Puharich's early work with the South American healer of that nickname, psychic surgery, is carefully examined, and for those interested in this unusual subject, that book is a good place to begin. In the raw material, manifestations of this type of materialization are discussed and the information is quite interesting. Back in the United States, although I could no longer work at the typewriter, I was still able to offer the continuing weekly meditations and to take on advanced students for individual work. In 1978, James Allen McCarty heard about our group, first from a number of people who had meditated at our Sunday night meetings and had gone on to form a light center in Nature Preserve in Marion County, Kentucky, and then from a 2-hour call-in radio show that Don and I had done in Lexington, Kentucky. He came up with many people from the Marion County Meditation Group to experience our meditations. After 2 meditations, the group as a whole stopped coming, but Jim made the 140-mile round trip almost weekly. Beginning in the spring of 1980, Jim had, for many years, been searching for some method of aiding humanity. Born in 1947, and equipped with degrees in business and education, he had studied, in addition, alternative methods for teaching consciousness expansion. Some of this time was spent working with inner-city children, but he began to find a very strong desire to discover a clearer idea of what it was he was seeking. In 1972, he booked a course of study in consciousness expansion called Brain Self-Control with a gruff old mountain man who lived in a log cabin at 10,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. During this course, he learned, for the first time, of the possibility of communication with advanced civilization from outer space, not through any man-made means like radios, telegraphs, or electronic gadgetry, but through the use of the frontal lobes of the human brain. Since this very central experience was in wilderness country, rocks, pine, and juniper, he decided to search for an equally remote piece of land upon which he could then offer these brain self-control experiences to others. On 132 acres in central Kentucky, with a running creek for an access road, he formed the Rock Creek Research and Development Laboratories and began to work on the subject closest to his heart, the evolution of mankind. He gave several workshops on this subject but found little interest in that area and so returned to a life of homesteading and solitude for the next 6.5 years, growing his own food, meditating, and studying. He was still curious as to what it would be like to be in a clear, two-way communication with advanced intelligent beings, and, thus, he very much enjoyed the meditations with the Louisville group. But he also had previously become interested in work being done in a group in Oregon. In the fall of 1980, he traveled from Kentucky to Oregon to work with this group, which was supposedly channeling the same source that Edgar Cayce had channeled in deep trance. However, the learning that he had received from the Sunday night meetings and from the advanced study that he had with me had spoken to his inner seeking, and, seemingly of its own accord, his mind made itself up for him after only 2 months in Oregon. He found that he needed to return to Louisville and work with Don and me. On December 23, 1980, he arrived in Louisville, having traveled 5,000 miles from the woods of central Kentucky to Oregon and back to Louisville. Don and I were endlessly grateful for McCarty's aid. His abilities were extraordinary. He had a grasp of the metaphysical material going back to his college days, and he had read extensively through all the intervening years, so he came to this work very informed of our areas of study. He was able to take up the physical part of the research, filing, making notes, transcribing tapes, and carrying on the correspondence that had sorely lapsed since my disability. Jim, always thorough, sold his land. LL Research merged with the Rock Creek Research and Development Laboratories, keeping our old partnership name for our publishing arm, purchased a new typewriter. Jim's fingers, strengthened by 6½ years of homesteading, overmatched my old electric typewriter, and we settled down to do what we didn't know. We discussed doing a new book, updating what we had learned in Secrets of the UFO, and had blank paper ready to be filled. Jim had begun to do back research in our voluminous files. 3 weeks after he came, the raw contact began. During all the years that I had been channeling, I had always channeled consciously, using my free will to clothe telepathic concepts in my own language. In 1980, a longtime friend and meditation group member, Elaine Flaherty, died a tragically young death. She had had juvenile diabetes and had died in her 30s. I had sat with her for many days in the hospital before she finally left her body, and she had told me several times that she wanted to make sure that her husband, Tom, was made aware that she was all right after her death. For she knew that she was likely to die. She had told Tom, also a longtime meditation group member as well. After her funeral, Tom came to me and asked if I would attempt to get in touch with Elaine. Having been through all too many seances and not having a great deal of personal commitment to the type of communication that one was likely to get from one's physically dead relatives, I was at first reluctant to attempt such mediumship. However, these were my good friends and I could not say no. Tom, Don, and Elaine's and Tom's son, Mike, gathered with me for the first attempt. After some moments of consciously offering myself for the contact with Elaine, I became unaware of the passing of time, and when I wakened, Tom had what sounded like Elaine's voice on tape speaking through me. That was my first experience with trance. I did not know, and to this day do not know, how it occurred. Tom asked once more if I would do this, and again I went into what seemed to be a very deep trance, remembering nothing and hearing what sounded like Elaine's voice on tape after the session. Don stated that if he had heard me from the next room without seeing me, he would have been certain it was Elaine. This work was extremely draining to me, and I asked Tom to accept the fact that I really did not wish to continue being this type of medium. Tom agreed, saying that he had what Elaine had promised and was satisfied. However, only a few days later, while working with an advanced meditation student, Leonard Cecil, I received a new contact, one which I had never had before. As I do in all cases, I challenged this entity in the name of Christ, demanding that it leave if it did not come as a messenger of Christ consciousness. It remained, so I opened myself to its channel. Again, I went almost immediately into trance, and the entity, which called itself Ra, began its series of contacts with us. This contact is ongoing, fascinating, and, to me, a source of some disquiet. The person who decides to become a vocal channel in the first place has already taken a step which is, to some people, quite difficult. That is, the willingness to speak the words of one which is not controlled by the self. In free will channeling, it is possible to choose to stop channeling. However, it is also possible to utter complete nonsense because the channel never knows in advance what the next concept will be. I hasten to add that this nonsense has never occurred in my experience, and that the channelings have always made a reasonable amount of sense, and, in many cases, have been quite inspirational. Nevertheless, in a society where you are taught to measure your words with some care, it seems an irresponsible act to simply blurt out that which comes into your mind. When, in order for the contact to occur, trance has to be obtained, the disquiet grows into something close to a near panic on my part. I do not know how the procedure for a trance works, and I am always afraid that in this session nothing will happen. I will remain conscious, and I will receive no contact. Again, this has never happened. Since neither I nor either of the others in our group has any real idea of how to aid me beyond a certain point in achieving a state of trance, there is nothing to be done but simply to move ahead. Don states that, although my state of trance is similar to others he has observed, it is what he would call telepathic reception in the trance state. Although I studied literature in my undergraduate days and was a librarian for many years, reading the material almost always offers me the opportunity to learn a new word or two, and has certainly stretched my mind in the area of science, which in my education was woefully lacking. What concerns me perhaps more than anything else is that someone who reads this material will consider this human being that I am to have some sort of wisdom that Ra certainly has but that I certainly do not. If this work impresses you, I can only ask that you please make a sharp differentiation in your mind between the words and the medium through which the words come. You would not, for instance, expect the water pipe to be responsible for the quality of the water which runs through it. Certainly all of us in the research group try, through meditation and daily life, to prepare ourselves as best we can for these sessions. Nevertheless, what comes through our group stands on its own and cannot be said to reflect on the wisdom or so-called spiritual advancement of any of its members. As our popular philosophy has it, we are all bozos on this bus. If you have any questions as you read, please feel free to write the Rock Creek group. Its correspondent, Jim, will never ignore a letter, and since he has his own experiences of the sessions themselves to share, he will finish this introduction. Jim McCarty, we are beginners when it comes to knowing how the Ra contact occurs, and it has only been through a process of trial and error, session by session, that we have learned more about how to support our instrument, Carla, in the mental, physical, and spiritual senses. We were so excited about the Ra contact when it first began that we had 2 sessions per day for days at a time, but we have since learned that this procedure was much too wearing on Carla. We average about 1 session every week to 10 days now, which allows us to prepare for each session with the greater degree of care that seems to be required as sessions accumulate. A great deal of thought goes into the questions which Don asks during each session. Each of us contributes ideas, but the great bulk of the line of questioning is accomplished by Don. Since he has the years of experience in investigating the UFO contactee phenomenon necessary to develop the intellectual foundation required in any attempt to fit the diverse pieces of this puzzle together. He also has the intuitive sense that is vital in following the unexpected and profoundly revealing answers that Ra so often gives with further questions, developed on the spur of the moment, to take advantage of the new insights. With the decision made to hold a session the night before the session is to occur, we arise the morning of the session, have a light breakfast, and begin the series of steps which will best aid us in successfully completing the session. I give Carla a half-hour back massage to loosen her muscles and joints before each session because she will have to remain absolutely motionless for between an hour and 45 minutes. Then we meditate so that the harmony we try to produce in our daily lives is intensified, and so that our desires are unified into the single desire to see contact with Ra. We then perform our ritual of protection and cleansing of the room in which the contact will be made and situate Carla in a prone position on the bed, covering her body with a white blanket, her eyes with a white cloth, and hook up the 3 tape recorder microphones just below her chin so that we don't miss any of the session if 1 or 2 tape recorders malfunction. By this time, all that is visible of Carla is her hair flowing down both of her shoulders and her nose poking out of the sea of cloth white surrounding it. As she mentally recites the prayer of St. Francis, Don is aligning the table which holds the Bible, candle, incense, and chalice of water in a straight line with her head, as recommended by Ra. After Don lights the candle and incense, he and I walk the circle of 1 around Carla and repeat the words which begin each contact. At some point after that, Carla departs her physical body and Ra then uses it to make the words which form the responses to Don's questions. I meditate and send light to Carla for the duration of the session, only taking time out to flip the tapes over as they finish each side. When the session is over, Don waits a few moments for Carla to return to her usually quite stiff body, calls her name a few times until she responds, helps her to sit up, rubs her neck a bit, and gives her the chalice full of water to drink after we and I have filled it as full of our love vibrations as we can. Since Carla has no idea of what has occurred during the session, she is always most curious to know how it went. She has to settle for second-hand bits and pieces of information until I can get the session transcribed from the tapes, which is usually very easy since Ra speaks quite slowly and forms each syllable with precise enunciation. Participating in this communication with Ra has been most inspiring for each of us because of the blend of eloquence and simplicity which characterizes Ra's responses. The information contained in the raw material has been most helpful to us in increasing our knowledge of the mystery of the creation and our evolution through it. We hope that it might also be useful to you.
Okay, so we are finished the introduction of all the characters and the researchers that were part of the project to contact Ra. It was a little long, but it was extremely important to know the background and the amount of work that went into getting to this point to be able to channel a 6-dimensional being and how Carla, what she went through, and the fact that she was the perfect character to use for channeling Ra. And it was just, it was important to get all this background. So in the next segment, we are going to get into the actual channeling questions and answers with Ra moving forward. So I will see you in the next video.